Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ECRF conference, the 21st conference in Gibraltar. My name is Steve Roylance. I'm the Senior Vice President for Identity Services at UbiSecure. What I'm going to talk to you today about is identity assurance. We're going to go through an introduction to myself and UbiSecure. Really, I want to focus on a problem that we don't have today, but we will or possibly have in the future. And we need help from business registries, and we're also able to provide help to business registries. And that's about LEI issuance. So I'll go into a basic introduction of what an LEI is. Some of you may already know, and obviously Rico is here to talk about the LEI as well. I'll go through the LEI issuance process and set the scene, and then we'll talk about identity assurance for individuals and really how that is set up in Europe. We can talk about the multiple stakeholders involved in this and how we can help them, including UbiSecure helping business registries and in turn business registries helping banks. So a quick introduction to me. I'm a regular attendee. I know many people here. I've been attending IACA, CRF and ECRF and been lucky to attend those for many years, 5+, obviously not as long as some of the individuals in the room. I'm the Senior Vice President for Identity Services and responsible for the Legal Entity Identifier project for UbiSecure, which we call Rapid LEI. So it's an LEI issuance platform based on speed, but also based on accuracy. Only just recently launched, and we hope to obviously take a large portion of the market on that and help that to drive our technologies and use it as proof points for the underlying UbiSecure product range. So I've been involved with identity assurance really for some 15+ years. I was the founder of CAB Forum, which is the CA browser forum. That was in 2005, joint founder with one of my colleagues at the time who worked for VeriSign. And ultimately that was responsible for bringing us higher levels of authentication on the internet. So if somebody wanted to see that the company's registration office in Ireland was that entity, they could do so through the extended validation SSL certificate that told them that CRO.IE was that actual entity and that they were either entering data into the right area or they were taking information from that. In terms of UbiSecure, I won't go into a detailed discussion about UbiSecure here, but we focus on customer identity and access management. So that's smoothing the process flow of onboarding customers, making sure that we protect customer information in terms of GDPR requirements that are mandatory, certainly globally now, but certainly very applicable in Europe and European-based customer basis, and also how we add additional capabilities and functions to that, which could be step-up authentication, it could be multi-factor authentication, it could be delegated administration, basically anything to do with customer management and providing consent for logging on and those types of services. Again, information available from me at the end if anybody wants to find out more details. So let's set the scene. We'll first of all just make sure everybody knows what an LEI is. It's an international standard. It's a globally unique numbering system brought into place really by the Group 20 who decided that they did not want another meltdown after the financial crisis in 2008. And it's taken sort of a decade really to get some significant momentum behind it as regulators start to mandate that the LEI is used in terms of reporting for transparency. And I think that momentum will increase, it will accelerate, and eventually I don't see any reason why every company in the world doesn't need an LEI. If we sort of draw a parallel to the certificate industry, in the early years of providing SSL certificates for websites, you only needed an SSL certificate if you were supplying or if you were taking credit card information from customers. Then best practice started to change that if you were taking login information and providing services, and now we're at the point where the entire internet it will be encrypted using SSL certificate technology. I can see the LEI process following the same thing. So now LEI is a 20-digit number. Here's an example of a number that UbiSecure through Rapid LEI might create. So we prefix 9845, which is identifying us as the LEI provider, 2 zeros, a random string of numbers which don't actually mean anything other than they are a unique string, and then a check digit at the end to make sure that all works. So there's UbiSecure's record on the glyph. That's our LEI number. Legal entity name, other name is also included. Important thing to know here is the registration authority. That's really important. Back in 2014 in CRF in Abu Dhabi, I talked about the necessity for registration authorities worldwide to sort of club together and form some kind of list so that anybody anywhere on the planet can decide whether or not they're transacting with a real entity. Effectively, the GLIFE have done this, which is great news. What it means is that there is a single list of business registries and the endpoints to those, so people can start to figure out whether or not they're contacting the right registry and whether or not the information about that business is legitimate. There is an open opportunity for fraudulent use of different URLs for companies' registries that don't exist, and the GLIFE are starting to put together that list. So the LEI issuance process, so this sort of sets the scene of the problem that we say we don't have today, but we will have in the future, and potentially you do have today, is the individual applying, in this case, for an LEI, approaches Rapid LEI. We have an identity management platform, we have a front end they use, and then we also have a back end where we configure that and link it to things like the business registry enumeration that I just mentioned. In this case, 535 is UK Companies House for England and Wales. There are 3 separate ones for England and Wales, for England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Then we have the Entity Legals Form code, which again is another great initiative. It's an ISO standard, ISO 20275, which helps to sort of make sure that company types are enumerated in certain jurisdictions. So there's no confusion in terms of spelling or exactly what a company type is, and misrepresentation. It makes data gathering much easier and makes accurate reporting much easier. So those are all covered in the system that we have. What we also take as part of the application process from an accounting perspective are ultimate parents and direct parents. This has been deemed one of the sort of best mechanisms from a global perspective at trying to figure out the connectivity between different company types. Of course, there are slight differences in each country and some complexities. Sometimes business registries help to record that, sometimes they don't. So it's not something that is a standard, but the LEI issuance process and the LOUs try to provide good data on all of this so that can have some kind of basis from a worldwide level at showing the reporting structures of companies and how they're all interlinked. So on a daily basis, what we do is we take the LEI number we've created, the legal entity reference data, the relationship records or any exception reporting if there are no relationships, and we push that through to the GLIFE. We can do that 10 times a day, but on a daily basis, all other LOUs provide that information to the GLIFE, and GLIFE provides that into a concatenated file which is available for anyone to download. The GLIFE is an open data charter, so therefore anyone in the world can download that. They can also report any inaccuracies that they've spotted to the GLIFE, who in turn report that to the LOU and then potentially to the applicant to have that corrected. So it's a good self-management process, and as the system matures, as the processes mature, as data starts to get better, and as more entities are using the open data, that will only improve, which is good for all business ecosystems worldwide. That is known as the challenge process. So that one of the challenges that we have is how do we know the individual who is the applicant potentially is the same individual that's registered on the business registry or has been given permission by the individual on the business registry to apply for an LEI. So at the moment we can and we're able to offer a fairly simplistic name matching exercise that if the individual has the same name as a director who is allowed to sign on the business registry, then we have sufficient confidence through his attestation and self-declaration that he's signing, and therefore we can issue an LEI. But there may be that we have other information. Is it an email address that's available and other credentials? But of course, the more credentials we try to gather, the more GDPR sort of exposure we have and the greater risk we have in terms of how we handle that data and use that data for our processes. So how do we prove they're the same? Well, in Europe, there is a multitude of different identity assurance systems out there, digital identities. And here's an example. So our friends at A Squared, that's the blog information at the bottom, and I've got a link later on, allowed us to use this graphic. Very well illustrates all of the different possibilities. And of course, for any company registry in Europe who is accepting foreign, effectively foreign qualification or a setup of a company from a foreign individual, non-domiciled, then you have the requirement to try and plug in some of these identification systems to allow that to be more cost effective, faster, and of better quality, certainly meeting some of the requirements of your beneficial owner needs, etc. So quite a complex number of things to try and plug together to have those all working. And of course, we've got the overlying EIDAS framework on top of this with digital certificates that may or may not be presented. So quite complicated for the business registry. That's where UberSecure can help. So identity assurance to other stakeholders. So we start off back with the problem here. So if we were to use this identification method instead of these particular point references here, that would be a potential way forward, which would simplify the process and provide us that common point of reference to be able to assure that these two people are the same and that the application for the LEI was legitimate. And of course, other stakeholders that are involved in this not only are LEI issuers, but clearly banking, where they are required to perform KYC or anti-money laundering requirements, potentially have to take more data than, say, certification authorities and connected government. So there's a lot of different requirements that are fulfilled by using this particular technology. As well as making sure that GDPR requirements are not overstated. So helping business registries. Let's go through an example on this. So we have the citizen who is requiring to create a business on the business registry, and we have the potential identity providers that are available within that citizen's jurisdiction that are available to the business registry. So the identity provider can be any one of these, as we've said. So the business registry has to try and figure out how to plug in all of those different ones. That's where UberSecure can help. The identity platform can be configured to connect to those and therefore form a trust relationship, allowing the business registry to trust the information from the identity provider. So the first stage of the process is to register with an ID. Now the ID is available from the identity provider, so the user is redirected to the identity provider service. They authenticate to that service, and then the user comes back to the registry with the vetted identity attributes, and registration is complete. So the business registry has simplified the method by which they onboard that user, and therefore avoided the necessity in some cases to reach out to them by pin mailer to the address or various other KYC type capabilities they may wish to perform instead. So we have vetted and verified identity attributes that are effectively passed to the business registry, who then combine their unique items, which is the company name, company number, and potentially registered address and any other information that's necessary, company formation date, and so on. So that's really how UberSecure, through the identity platform, can help business registries to streamline their onboarding process, add better data quality in terms of the individual. Of course, the authentication choice could be an internal username password. It is maybe not necessary for an individual, or an individual doesn't have access to any of these particular items, but they still require to register themselves on the business registry. And if that username password is a service, then we'll use that in the next section to show you how it's an advantage to other parties. So we've got a slight difference now. So we've sort of moved everybody along. That in this example, the business registry is now the identity provider, and the UberSecure identity platform is on the sort of front end to the business registry, as well as on the back end connecting to identity providers. The bank, in this case, takes on the role of the service provider, wanting to provide a service to the principal individual who has been registered on the business registry. and we've got a trust relationship between the two organisations. And the process flow is pretty similar to what we mentioned before, the only difference being that the user, when they come back, brings with them the attributes on the business registry, which include the business name, business number, and may include other things such as registered address. And that allows the bank to perform their KY service, know your customer services. Many of you may have seen similar sign-up capabilities on multiple websites, which allow you to do a very similar process. The sign-up with Facebook or Google uses OAuth as the basic capability, which is what we're saying that we can use here. And it means that we're opening sort of a slight door to allow that authentication to take place and avoid the user setting up a different username password on whatever site this is sort of taken from. But at the same time, attributes can be passed over, which can be permanent identifiers, to allow that individual to be recognized later on. Well, in this case, the permanent identifiers are the attributes of the business, which allow that individual to be associated with that business. But of course, the other side of this is that the individual may wish to delegate out the capabilities to other parties, so that the verified attributes, when they are passed over, could be passed down in terms of that capability to other members or other team members. Much like in the physical world of passing a business card or allowing an individual to carry a business card of the business, then the individual could be allowed to pass the identity attributes of the business to other service providers. So not necessarily banks, but certification authorities, or in this case for UberSecure as an LEI issuer, then they could pass those over to complete that process. So that delegated administration is another capability that is built into the UberSecure platform, as well as the ability to self-administer your own account details and reset passwords and things like that. Ultimately, the bank spends money today in performing KYC, so there is no there's a possibility, should I say, that the bank will wish to pay to the business registry. If the business registry wants to recoup funds for this service from the bank will be paying far less to the business registry, and the service can be performed at a far more regular basis. It could be even quarterly as opposed to once every several years, providing a much more timely, accurate and up-to-date KYC capability, which is far less intrusive into the registered individual. The business registry themselves has a far greater use of the username, passwords or authentication capabilities that the individual is using, so they are more familiar with entering the business registry, therefore making sure the business registry information is correct, doing timely reporting of requirements and accounting reporting, etc. So it's a benefit all round in adopting this system. So here's some references that I used through the talk. So first of all, we have a great study which was created by the GLIFE, which shows that almost a quarter of the time, actually slightly over a quarter of the time of salespeople in the banking world are spent onboarding customers. In reality, that should be a lot less. The technology is available. Many business registries have username password capabilities already. So placing the UberSecure identity platform, which again is industry standard, but we are offering some good incentives to be able to work with business registries to provide this with banks and other relying parties in the business sectors. But that sort of shows where significant cost savings can be made by banks. UberSecure has some white papers. One is the critical need for data accuracy. So as part of that attribute sort of transfer, the advantage the bank has, the advantage that everybody has, is that it's direct attributes that are being transferred, not forms that are being filled out and corrected at a later stage, and errors can't creep into there. It's really important that those data points are accurate, especially for LEI issuers, which UberSecure is. And then finally, as I mentioned, the A2 blog also talks about e-identity in the European way, and that was a great graphic to be able to illustrate the complexity that business registries face in trying to plug all of those items together. I really appreciate the time everybody has taken in listening to me. And any questions, then obviously my contact details will be on the ECRF website, and I look forward to seeing you all at future conferences, and thanks very much for your time.